Okay, could I have you introduce yourself to the camera, please?
Yep, my name is Denise Elder. Let me tell you what I do.
Yeah, tell me what you do.
I am a therapist and I am a preschool teacher, and we are in my classroom.
Yes, it was very interesting setting up the camera.
Right.
First of all, I just have to ask for your permission to be on camera today.
Yep.
And like explicit permission, so you're all good on that front?
Absolutely.
And to use your full name?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask your name, occupation, and the city you call home?
Oh, okay. So my name's Denise Elder, and I have two occupations. I'm a therapist. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I am a preschool teacher. And I call Midland, Michigan my home.
Okay, awesome. Did you grow up here?
I did.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself?
I think I'm a fairly caring person. I really take the interests of other people to heart, and I want to be helpful, and I want to be engaged with people. I just want to be a kind human being.
Okay, so you're saying that you're like a really good listener, an active listener. You participate in individuals' lives really
Absolutely.
well. Okay, that's really awesome. How do you feel today?
I'm okay. A little nervous being on camera, but I'm all right.
And how are you actually feeling today?
Well, before I came here to meet you, my husband and my youngest were having a squabble, and so trying to diffuse that has just left me a little mom guilt for leaving in this situation.
Sorry.
That's fine, and a little stress that my husband is not handling the situation like I think he should. So a little stressed on that front, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here anyways.
Absolutely.
I
it happens.
totally understand. Things happen all the time, but I appreciate you making the time for me to meet with you and just working around my schedule quite a bit. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Oh gosh. I would like to ask you to tell me a story about a difficult time in your life when you received someone's compassion.
Okay. I was thinking about this. About 3 years ago, we had lived in Oklahoma and we had moved back to Michigan. And my oldest was in preschool. And my husband was struggling to find a job, and I was only working part-time. And we were really struggling financially. And we were to the point where we weren't sure if we were going to be able to keep her in preschool. We didn't know if we could afford it. And I went to the director, who was also a really good friend, and I just broke down crying, and I was like, we're really struggling. We don't know how we're gonna afford our groceries. My parents are great, but I didn't want to reach out to them. And so she came to me a couple days later, and she's like, the church wants to give you guys a free month's worth of tuition.
Oh, awesome.
And so again, sobbing, because I was like, that is so amazing. But it was just so kind, and I thought it was so compassionate and so caring that they looked at our situation and were willing to step in and take that burden off of us.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. What would you actually say compassion is?
I think it's just seeing somebody that's in need and struggling and listening to what they've got going on and trying to help meet those needs, either if it's emotionally or just talking to them, giving them a hug, financially helping out if we can, just really being really kind and just understanding that we all have some difficulties and we need that extra understanding.
Okay, awesome. So you're just saying that, in short, compassion is simply seeing an issue and alleviating it.
For sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. When you remember the compassion that was shown to you, how do you feel about reliving the memory?
I can still feel those emotions, of just one from that situation, relief, because it was just wow, that's one less thing we have to worry about this month. And just such joy too, because it was wow, this person's listened to me and has really taken our needs into consideration. And it's really heartwarming to think back on that, even though it was a really hard time for us and we were struggling. But that piece of it, receiving that was really, it was just really neat. It was really special.
Did you feel really taken care of?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. Thank you. Can you tell me a story of a time when you offered compassion to someone?
Okay. So probably about 2 weeks ago in this classroom, we have a little girl who kind of struggles with drop off sometimes. And they came in that morning. I think it was after spring break, so that's always a rough transition back anyway. And the mom was basically like football hold. Like she had no shoes on. The little girl was screaming and just meltdown. Like trying to take her clothes off, like in the doorway, like a whole thing. And the mom just looked so defeated and just started like crying. And I was like, okay, like we've got this. You're doing amazing. Let's take her back to the closet here, the coat closet where they put their stuff. Let's give us a minute. And I just asked her if I could give her a hug and just I just tried to like reassure her that, we were going to get through this and just listen to her. I ended up talking to her at the end of the day and just kind of like processing with her, like what had happened, and trying to give the little girl the kindness and care. We ended up having to go down to the office and just let her have some space. But just really, I feel like it was like I was able to recognize like it was a really big emotional moment.
It was built up.
Oh, yeah. And the mom's like, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And like just felt very defeated and like, is there something wrong with my kid? So just to be able to like, I feel like I was able to talk her down and just encourage her and be like, you're doing amazing. This is just a struggle. She's a little girl who likes her way, very strong-willed, and just trying to be able to be there for the mom. And then again, like I said, at the end of the day, we were able to reconnect and talk, and I think that was really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Just out of curiosity, do you think that children learn how to be compassionate from their parents, or like it's family to family? Because we did in this class, we looked at how different income levels interpret compassion or how they see suffering, and like higher income families don't actually see it, so their kids don't interact with it as much because they don't even know that like you can go without food in some cases. So would you say that kids kind of interact with compassion differently based on how their parents show it to them?
I would say so.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, I think definitely the more that they see it, the more that behavior is modeled, the more that they're going to have an understanding and be able to give that to other people. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Sorry, I have to have a list because I swear if I speak, I'm like, the page is gone.
Right.
It is just gone entirely. Notes are how I get through life anymore. Let's see. Did I already ask you? Okay. Is there a time you or someone else needed compassion but did not receive it?
That was a hard one. I don't, like thinking back, I don't think so. I feel like I've been very blessed and fortunate to have people around me who recognize it. And even if maybe it wasn't like recognized right that second, that person always has come back, or people have always come back and been like, I am so sorry, and like, kind of readdressed maybe the situation. But there's nothing that sticks out that I really struggled with in that respect.
Well, would you say that's mainly because of your career? When you see it, you address it more?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely much more the person that like, if something's going on, I don't shy away from, maybe even difficult conversations. Especially like with coworkers or like that, like kids in my class with parents.
If you see it, you
fix
it as much as possible.
Yeah, right. I try to be aware of that.
How do you handle, not feeling taken down or sullen after a lot of these conversations? Because it can be hard.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think just years of practice and understanding that, especially with therapy, I want to be present in the moment with that client, and even with my kids in the class, and sometimes it takes some processing after the fact if it's counseling with one of my coworkers, if it's like a really hard conversation or something, or with my students. My mom is a teacher, so I'll usually call her and be like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. And she's like, oh, I do believe that. And I think I really try to be mentally aware of taking those steps to kind of decompress and just really not shying away from those emotions that maybe even get triggered for me, and recognizing that.
Okay. Would you say that you taking that time to decompress would even be self-compassion?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I would say so, for sure. Especially in some situations, when there's really difficult conversations or topics that are brought up, it can, because they can be really heavy.
Okay,
So,
yeah. Well,
mhm.
thank you.
Mhm.
Is there a time when you wish you would have shown compassion but didn't?
So I have a little boy in my class right now, and I do feel like I show compassion, but I do feel like it took me some time. Like I struggled at the front. Um, my guess, because he's still young, my guess is he's going to end up with like an ADHD diagnosis.
Okay.
He potentially could end up with, being on the spectrum of autism as well, just based off some interactions that we've had. But I feel like at the beginning of the school year, I was much more like, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, versus taking a second and like going, what is this little boy going through? What is he dealing with? He's got great support at home, but him himself, right? Like what's going on in his brain and his inability. It's an inability. It's not him trying to be naughty or trying to be disrespectful. It's truly an impulse.
Yeah.
He can't control it.
And he's learning.
And he's learning, right. So I feel like at the beginning of the year, I definitely struggled with not just being on him constantly and always it being a negative reinforcement, to where now I try, hey, remember, we're trying to work on that impulse, like let's think about it in our head but not say it out of our mouth,
and control back.
Right. And just being aware and compassionate of the fact that he literally, like, this is something he's going to have to learn how to cope with, and that me being on him in a negative way constantly is not going to be beneficial. And so I think I've learned that I was not giving that to him. I was not giving him the compassion he needed. But I'm definitely much more aware and trying to take the steps to correct that as best as possible.
Would you say that like even education needs to be more compassionate to students with that kind of a inability to interact with people in a certain way, or even different learning styles?
For sure. Yeah.
Because some teachers are hard and strong with, no, nobody should have a change curriculum.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people I know personally, just they are some of the smartest people I know, but they learn so differently. And if they're not given a little more time, a little more space, a little more bodily autonomy, like being able to sit up, or having a bouncy seat, or just a little bit of a way to control themselves, or fidget toys, just refocusing.
Yeah.
That's not always available, and I would say it's a lack of compassion, personally.
Yeah.
To not allow these students to have the tools they need to succeed.
Absolutely.
Because they're working twice as hard.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's that fine line, I think it's a struggle in education where, the teachers, it's that you have this many students. If you have one student who needs some accommodations and they don't have the support from maybe the school administration or maybe an assistant or something, then to these other students, it's like, well, but that kid gets away with X, Y, or Z. Why can't we? And I think that's a conversation that needs to be explored in education, as to how to effectively, and like share with the students, like, all of us learn differently. All of us need different things, and we do our best to accommodate certain things for all of you, and be compassionate in that respect. But unfortunately, I feel like that's not always
possible.
Exactly.
Like, I was just thinking, and it's totally unrelated to this in some ways, but in situations where the student's special needs fully conflict. Like, there's some kids that can't do noise, and if you put them in the same classroom as an autistic child that's la 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 tech, like ADHD noises.
Right. The stimming and all that.
It's beyond infuriating, and it's not fair to either of them to have to coexist in a lot of ways, but existing is coexisting. So, what do you think that situation would require to be fair to both students?
I think, especially in elementary levels, I see this in the public school and in private schools, they've gone towards that no child left behind. They've taken away those resource rooms, and a lot of private schools can't afford that, so the private schools just don't have them. And I feel like there needs to be a recognition that those resource rooms can be beneficial
Mm-hmm.
to where those students we can have students who need, these are their IEP based needs or whatever. They can go in the classroom for this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's quiet. Or the ones that are going to make the noise and it doesn't bother the other students, they can go in this room at this
In
time.
consideration in the scheduling.
Exactly, right. And so, you can go work on your math or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, whatever the struggle is. But I feel like there needs to be more of that, like recognition,
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, we don't want to leave behind students, but you are leaving behind students with that mentality because certain needs
They're
aren't being
dragging
met.
some.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like we had just said before, different students learn different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only doing one way,
right,
you are literally kicking the rest of them in the shins and leaving them behind.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for your take on that.
Yeah.
A lot of different teachers have had a lot of different takes. I know you know Mrs. Vanessa,
Mm-hmm.
and her take is very similar to yours, I believe, and because of her own children
Right.
being on the spectrum,
right,
she has a deep understanding of it. That a lot of parents are like, well, my kid doesn't deserve that. Well,
right.
it's
Yeah.
not about what the children deserve because they all deserve a chance.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to be considerate of everybody's needs and
Yeah.
desires in their education because everyone has a desire to learn.
Oh, for sure.
Like, there's not truly a thing of lazy unless you're taught it.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Do you think compassion is important?
I do think compassion is important. I think it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people being aware of it and recognizing what it is and utilizing it is can be vital, especially in the world we're in right now.
Oh, yeah.
So.
How do you think it's important, like, as far as, like, interactions?
I think it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line, especially in today's society of there's certain things where people I feel are maybe pushing too compassionate because they're trying to be too understanding and too.
We don't want to overlook mental illness.
Right, and we don't want to.
For the sake of being kind to everyone.
Exactly, right. But I also do think that people, if we can look at when we're talking to somebody, if we don't know somebody, it goes, I guess, back to some of that judgment too. Like, let's not just judge somebody because you don't know them until you get to know them, and then maybe that compassion comes in because you're like, oh, I didn't realize.
Okay, so maybe practice more understanding
Mm-hmm.
compassion rather than compassion for things that you don't actually understand, because that might not even be compassion anymore if you're just going out of your way to reimburse certain ideas.
Yeah.
Because some kids, you're a teacher, some kids will lay on the ground and just make cat noises all day.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
sometimes you go, oh, well, we can't actually pee on the ground.
Right.
It's like a health hazard for everyone.
Right. We are human beings.
So thank you. I appreciate your take on that. This goes right into the next one. Do you think that sometimes we show too much? So, yes.
Sometimes I do think that, for sure.
Okay, awesome. If you were to offer words of wisdom about compassion, what would they be?
I think people just need to take a step back, and we need to look around and see everybody, and just, again, the fine line of we don't have to accept, if you don't believe, you don't have to accept the fact that somebody is a cat or, certain things like that. But I do think that there comes a point where there can be conversations that can be had about why people believe what they believe, why people think what they think, and doing it in a way that can be beneficial. And so I think if people could just stop and take a minute and just be like, just think about compassion and think about, we don't have to just be mean and cruel and say hurtful things because we don't believe the same things.
Okay, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we don't all need to have the same thought system.
Right, exactly.
For us to not kill each other.
Exactly, right. We can be compassionate and we can say, okay, well, that's interesting that that's your take on that. My take's not like this, but, like that, thank you for sharing that. I find that right. And, I think that could be so helpful if people could just work on their compassion a little bit more.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I had a thought and then it just. Well, thank you for being here today. I
Yes.
really appreciate you taking the time
Absolutely.
and opening up your classroom to me.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
And thank you for that. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the video.
Okay.